The first day of NBA free agency is coming to a close, and it was a very slow day. Very, very slow day. Very disappointing. I'm sitting here on Twitter, scrolling, refreshing, and just not much happened. Not much happened for the Kings specifically, and not much happened around the NBA really. And there could be a few reasons for that. One could be that the NBA is just going to start cracking down on tampering. And so players, teams, agents, they're all being more careful and not discussing deals with players before they're allowed to, which I don't know. I question that a little bit. I feel like people are still talking. Maybe two, it's just about the new CBA. I've seen people say it's because second round picks are more valuable, so you don't want to get them taken away if you are tampering. But then also teams just being more careful of who they sign, how much money they're giving out because of the aprons and just the new salary cap rules. But then three is just Paul George taking his sweet time. Like if this was even the past CBA, if Paul George is just sitting there and not making a decision yet, that holds a lot of things up. Klay Thompson as well, in terms of where he's going to go, where the Warriors are going to sign and trade him. It could hold a lot of things up. It's an entire domino effect. And so those are kind of the three reasons that it could have been a slow free agency, start to free agency. But we'll go over the things, some of the things that did happen and what could be coming in the future. Obviously, lots of Brandon Ingram rumors, so we'll go over that. And so let's start with some of the smaller moves for the Kings. First of all, it didn't happen today. Was it yesterday that it happened where Jordan Ford, Jalen Slauson, Kessler Edwards were all not extended qualifying offers by the Kings, making them unrestricted free agents. And so we knew that was coming for Jordan Ford and Jalen Slauson because we had already filled the two-way slots and they weren't going to get the normal roster spots. I said it before when we learned about who we had filled the two-way slots with, but I am disappointed that Jalen Slauson isn't going to get one of those two-way slots. I thought he showed some promise as an athletic forward, but not enough promise to be too worried about. And then Kessler Edwards, a guy who I was actually excited about when the Kings traded for from Brooklyn, took a flyer on him, but again, just didn't work out. He had some good moments. I thought he shot the three better last season, not just from a percentage standpoint, but he just looked confident and taking the right shots, playing well within the offense, had some really good defensive moments, but it just wasn't enough to keep him around, and it wasn't worth the roster spot for him. And so those guys are all unrestricted free agents. The Kings brought back Alex Len, which I was hoping they would do. 1 year, 3.3 million, which is the veteran minimum for players that have been in the league 10 plus seasons. And I'm really happy about that. I mean, we just keep bringing Alex Len back on the minimum, and I feel like this next season might be the season where he actually just completely gets the backup center role. No competition, no Chimezie Metu or Rashawn Holmes, no JaVale McGee, hopefully no injuries like last year, because Alex Len is so solid, led the team in net rating, defensive rating. He goes out, he does his job, and the backup center position is just not one that I think the Kings should invest heavily in, especially when you have a reliable backup like Alex Len. Because Domantas Sabonis is going to play, 38 minutes per game, at least in important games. And so Alex Len is going to be there for 10 to 15 minutes. Like, you don't need to invest a lot into a backup center. Obviously, if you have a backup center that can play along Sabonis, then that's different because they're more versatile. And like you look at Minnesota, where they have Gobert, Cat, and Naz Reid. But you have Gobert at the center, and then Cat can play the four, and Naz Reid comes in and plays more like a wing anyways. And so there's more versatility there. And so that's why they can invest into those guys. But for the Kings, I just don't think it makes a lot of sense to invest a lot of money into the backup center position. It makes more sense to invest into the wing position alongside of Sabonis. And then obviously we already have a lot of guards. And Alex Len is just a guy who he just comes out, he does his job, and he does it very well. And so I'm very happy to see him back. And so that leaves the Kings with 2 open roster spots. They have the mid-level exception to work with. And the big rumor is a possible trade for Brandon Ingram. Obviously, we've been hearing murmurs of this leading up to today, and Sean Cunningham reported that the Kings were in talks with New Orleans for Brandon Ingram. And so Sean Cunningham, a reliable local source. But then we have a Twitter account that I don't know about its reliability, but reporting later in the day that there very much is still interest between the two parties, and the Pelicans are going to work with Brandon Ingram. He could stay with the Pelicans if he signs for less than the max, or they're going to work with him to figure out a trade destination for where he wants to go. And he has 1 year left on his deal, which is why he has a lot of control in where he wants to go, because he can choose to re-sign with the team that he gets traded to. No team wants to trade for him for a 1 year rental. So that's why he has that power. Again, these are rumors that I'm not sure about, but the reason that I believe it is because it sounds like it makes sense, where they said that it would need to be a 3-team deal because the Pelicans want a center. The Pelicans apparently like Harrison Barnes in picks and then want a center coming from a 3rd team. And so that rumor sounds plausible to me because before I even heard that rumor, it made a lot of sense that it would become a 3-teamer because of the fact of the Pelicans. They don't just want to bring in a bunch of first round picks or young guys. They want to compete. They're not just selling all of their players. They are trying to maximize the value of Brandon Ingram and then also get guys that fit around Zion, because they are choosing Zion Williamson. That's why they don't want to give the max to Brandon Ingram. And so they still want to win. They want to get guys that make sense around BI. Jonas Valanciunas is going to Washington. 3 years, $30 million. So he's out of New Orleans. Najee Marshall also is gone. He was a guy that I wanted the Kings to target. 3 years, $27 million to Dallas. The Pelicans traded for DeJounte Murray. Larry Nance is gone, so that's a guy that was playing backup center for them. Dyson Daniels is gone, so they're losing some defenders in Dyson and Najee. And so, okay, they like Harrison Barnes, maybe off the bench in that Najee Marshall role, I guess, even though he's not the same player, obviously. But then they want that center. It's like, where's that center going to come from? Maybe it could make sense to tie this deal, the Brandon Ingram deal, into the DeJounte Murray deal, where somehow, I don't know what Atlanta would get, but they're sending out Clint Capella maybe, because they've been wanting to sell him. The problem is then what is Atlanta getting? Because Kevin Huerter is going to be a part of this deal, most likely. And so what, is he going to go back to Atlanta? Probably not, because they want to shed money, I think. And so maybe that's not the one that makes sense, but the Kings need to find another partner to send a center. Walker Kessler, Rob Williams, guys like that maybe. And you're probably sending Kevin Huerter to that 3rd team in this scenario. Because again, if this rumor is to be believed, then Harrison Barnes would be on the Pelicans plus picks. And then I assume you would send Kevin Huerter somewhere else, and then the center goes to New Orleans. And so let's say this deal gets done. Brandon Ingram coming to Sacramento. We send out Harrison Barnes, Kevin Huerter, and picks. And that would mean that we are re-signing Brandon Ingram to a max. It would mean he wants to be here. And so having a core of Fox, Monk, Ingram, Keegan, Sabonis, like that's a really, really solid lineup there. And then you also have the more defensive guards to slot in as well in Keon and in Devin Carter. And so I think that could make a lot of sense, but that's what you're committed to. With the Malik Monk deal being so cheap, it maybe allows the Kings to go out and spend, but it is a little concerning. A guy with the injury history of Brandon Ingram, you would be committing a lot of money to him, and you'd be committing to 3 max guys in Fox, Sabonis, and Ingram. And then you have Keegan's extension coming up at some point. And if you are going to pay more than 2 guys the max, then you've got to really have everyone locked down, and you've got to be really confident that you can win with, the starting lineup you have plus like minimums after that, or maybe the starting lineup plus one guy off the bench and then all minimums or rookie guys on rookie deals. But the Kings do have some good deals. Like Keegan still is on a rookie deal. Keon's on a really team-friendly deal at this point. Devin Carter, rookie deal, so you hope he works out. Colby Jones still on a cheap deal. Alex Len on a minimum. And in this scenario, you would hopefully be able to bring in a wing with the mid-level exception still. It would get a little dicey because Brandon Ingram has a trade kicker. And so I think the hope is you would get him to waive that, because that's like an extra 5-6 million that he would be making. And so that would take away our ability pretty much to use the mid-level exception. And so hopefully you get him to waive that. You would only be taking in hopefully 1 to 3 million, depending if it is just Brandon Ingram or Brandon Ingram plus like a Matt Ryan coming back. So then you would still be able to use that mid-level exception to go out and get a wing that could be a backup. And so it is scary, but you have to take risks. And I do think this is a good risk if the Kings can go out and get Brandon Ingram for this price. But if they don't, maybe you can pivot back to Kyle Kuzma or Cam Johnson plus Dorian Finney-Smith. And just a quick interruption here, because making videos during free agency is tough, because guess what? Deals are happening while I'm editing this. So Derek Jones Jr. goes to the Clippers, 3 years, $30 million. And so I'm about to talk about Derek Jones Jr. quite a bit, mention his name. But so when you hear me talking about that, just insert whatever mid-level wing, right? Insert Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith, whatever guys out there, just insert that name in, and it's the same thing. Just I'm talking about mid-level exception wings, so whatever wing depth the Kings can get. And also, while I'm here, thank you guys for 500 subscribers. That's very cool. Didn't think I'd ever reach that. So yeah, now the video shall continue. And then also you have this mid-level exception. So you want to use this mid-level exception really no matter what, hopefully, even if you make a trade, to bring in more wing depth. And so Najee Marshall's gone, but because Najee Marshall went to the Mavericks, that frees up Derek Jones Jr. So DJJ is a possibility. The Kings were rumored to be interested, along with a bunch of teams, in Haywood Highsmith. And so that's a solid 3-and-D guy. Derek Jones Jr. is interesting. I love his athleticism and what he would bring to the Kings in terms of getting up and down the court, being a lob threat. The three-point shooting is very questionable, and so that's why you don't want to commit like a full MLE to him, I don't think. But if you get Brandon Ingram and still have all that MLE, then sure, and you want him to be the backup. It's interesting how the reporting is that Dallas had to pivot because they couldn't bring back Derek Jones Jr. because he switched agents. And so he can't sign for 15 days. And so that was very odd to me. I did not know that was a thing. And so they went with Najee Marshall. And so I'm just wondering, so is it just that, or did Derek Jones Jr. want more than what Najee got, which was $9 million a year? Because I don't want to commit any more than $9 million a year to a guy like Derek Jones Jr. But at the same time, if you bring in a guy like Brandon Ingram or even Kyle Kuzma, then you gotta go for it all and use all that money to then bring in the depth on the wing. But right now, the Kings really haven't done anything, and that's fine. It's just day one. It was a slow day one. But you got to get someone on the wing. Obviously, you're losing Kessler Edwards, right? And so he was a guy that was a depth piece and played every once in a while. And so you need someone to replace him that's hopefully better than him with the mid-level exception. You want to upgrade there. The Kings have 2 roster spots. And so I think my favorite scenario for the Kings right now is bringing in Brandon Ingram and then also being able to bring in a Haywood Highsmith or a Derek Jones Jr. To back up the wing position. So hopefully something happens in the coming days. Some other things that happened that are interesting. Paul George probably going to the Sixers, but again, we have to wait for that deal because I mean, things can happen. Maybe it doesn't happen. The Clippers already said goodbye to him, which was interesting. But it's good that talent's going east. Dallas wants Klay Thompson in a sign and trade. Not too worried about that. But you have Kentavious Caldwell Pope going to the Magic. So again, good. Get guys out of the West. Magic getting better. Hopefully, the Sixers getting better while the Nuggets get worse and the Clippers get worse. Those are things we like to see. Sixers also got Drummond and Eric Gordon. You got Chris Paul to the Spurs after he was waived by the Warriors. And so that's pretty cool, honestly. Chris Paul throwing lobs to Wemby. I'm actually excited to watch that. Plumlee going to the Suns as a backup center. If the Kings did go after a backup center, Plumlee probably would have been the guy that I would want. But he's gone to the Suns. I'm very much okay with Alex Len. It's funny. I was sitting here, refreshing. The first big deal, boom, Luke Cornett back to the Celtics, and then there was just like nothing after that. So a very slow day. Neemias Queta also getting a multi-year deal with the Celtics. Good for him. But yeah, that's about it for now. Not much happening. Hopefully the Kings get this deal for Brandon Ingram done. Or if not, get a deal for someone else done. But right now we can be patient because yes, the Kings haven't done a lot, but most teams haven't done a lot. And we're just waiting for this Paul George deal, I think, to go down for the dominoes to start falling. Because what if Paul George doesn't go to the Sixers? Then all of a sudden the Sixers are like, hey, we want Brandon Ingram. So that could be what the Pelicans are waiting for. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. But when something happens, I will be right back here to talk about it. So I'll see you guys then. Peace.